So welcome everyone to the funding year 2025 Form 470 Category 1 workshop presented by Lori. And Lori, this is all yours now. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you everyone who's attending today. So as Christine said, we're going to be focusing today solely on Category 1 services. So when we talk about Category 1, this is where, and I apologize, it said announces a school's intent. That should say library. I will fix that. But the form looks the same, whether it's a school or library system filing. But the purpose of this form is this is where you basically are requesting pricing. And when we talk about Category 1, this is internet access and transport, right, or your bandwidth. And then also, and I'm going to break this out so you can see the difference, hotspots for bookmobiles, or it could be for a kiosk, and then the off-premise hotspots that is now eligible, starting July 1st, 2025, that you can provide for staff as well as patrons. So this form itself, it acts as an RFP, a request for proposal. Now, depending on the type service, such as the hotspots for a bookmobile, you have to have a formal RFP document attached. All right, it just depends on the type service, right? But the form itself does act as a request for proposal. Depending on the service, you can also upload support documents to better explain what it is you're asking for. Anytime that you would upload a document, though, the system calls it an RFP. Now, when we file the 470, it automatically, as soon as you hit submit, begins the mandatory 28-day competitive bidding process. Because the E-rate rule is if a service is not listed on a Form 470, you cannot get requested on a 471, all right, the next step in the process. Bottom line, it won't be funded. So with the 470, you have to file for E-rate every year if you want the funding. But the Form 470, this is the only form, all the forms that's in the process. This is the only one that you may not need to file on an annual basis. It just depends on, do you have a multi-year contract, excuse me, where that contract will cover this upcoming funding year. Right? Or if you're asking for Cabio service, Cabio is that commercially available bandwidth internet access. All right. So, if you go back and check your contracts, if you have a multi-year contract, say for your bandwidth, and you're in year 2 or more of that contract, in this upcoming year, basically the contract will cover this upcoming year, meaning through June 30th, 2026, then you don't need to file a 470. All right, you would only file it for any new services or if the contract is coming up for renewal. Now, if you attended the training previously, the beginners or the veterans training, I mentioned about a couple of changes to this version of the 470. The first change is when you go to file the 470 and you submit it. In the old version, if you did not upload an RFP document and attach it to the form initially, then you lost the ability to add a form later after the 470 was submitted. Well, that has changed where now we do have the option, if we needed, to upload an additional RFP document. All right, and once we get the form submitted this afternoon and show you what it looks like to submit it, I'll show you what it looks like where you go to upload another document, like I said, if needed, but also remind you about some of the rules if you do upload another document, things to be mindful of. And then also they've added the ability to cancel a 470. And then you can also view any canceled forms. So when you tell the system you want to cancel a 470, it doesn't completely wipe it out. It just wipes it out so that a service provider won't see it, all right, and send you quotes. But you always have the ability to go out and see that previously filed 470. And again, showing the status of canceled. And it's very important, very helpful, I should say, to be able to cancel a form, if you filed something in error, right? So that way you don't have to keep, getting questions and quotes or bids from vendors when you really don't need it, all right? And the last bullet here, the addition of those hotspot devices, the wireless internet service for off-premise use. So again, that is all new for this year. So let's just jump in, and to be honest, this training today is not going to take very long. So just to give you a heads up, but please stop me if you do have any questions. And depending on what we're looking at, I may go from my static slide out to the training site so you can see what it looks like in real time. So once you get logged into the portal, all right, that's always the first step, getting into Epic. The easiest way, there's several ways you can start the form. The easiest is when you look in the upper right-hand corner, you will see where it says FCC Form 470. That's the shortcut to start the application. Again, that is the easiest. All right, but you'll see that on that landing page. When you do that, the first thing that the system asks, and it does this for pretty much any form that we file, it's going to ask for an application nickname. This is basically user defined, but I suggest, give it a name so that if you have to go back later and look up a previously filed form, it'll show you when you do a search that nickname you gave it, just to make it easier to distinguish one from another. I've seen folks over the years, say, this is my Form 470 number 1, Form 470 number 2, and then can't remember what's the difference. All right. So again, make it a little descriptive. Here I just said funding year 2025 for category 1. All right. You can put in, say, the library system's name, the initials, whatever. But again, something descriptive that you'll recognize later, or somebody coming behind you would be able to pick it out from the list. All right, and then we click here in the lower right-hand corner, save and continue. Now, the next couple of slides, as we're looking at the form, this it's just taking information from the portal and populating it on the application. All right, so the screen here, it's just letting me know that the application type that I'm filing for a library system, and that there are 2 entities. So the main library location and then a branch. And then it's also the recipient type. All of this is already set up in the portal. So that I'm a public library. Yep, there's a main branch and it's part of a system. All right, and again, just showing the name and the billed entity. So then we click on save and continue. Now, I do want to show you as we go through the form, if you have to stop in the middle of filing this, you get interrupted, the portal may time out. You just have to close it, come back later. Let me show you where to find this. This is probably one of the most difficult part with the form is where do I find, to be able to pick up where I left off. That's why so many people just go in and start a whole new one, and then you've got all these incomplete ones in the system. All right, so if you were to get, kicked out of the form, it times out, whatever. What you want to do is from that landing page, if you click on the blue menu bar where it says tasks, all right, it will indicate create form 470. All of the forms are like this. If it's still, incomplete, it starts with the word create instead of continue. All right, but in essence, you're simply continuing that form, picking up where you left off. All right, so that blue title there, hyperlink, just click there, picks up again where we left off. All right, so the next step then, once, they indicate, yep, here's the library, this is who's filing, then it's asking basically for the contact. Are you the main contact, yes or no? When you indicate yes, then it will auto-populate your information. All right, however you logged in, your name, your email address, your phone number. Now, if you indicate no, if you're going, if you're filing this under someone else's name, they have to have a portal account. All right. At the beginning stage of the form, you cannot manually provide information. All right. The contact has to have a portal account. All right. So I'm indicating, yes, I'm the main contact, and save and continue. Now, on the Form 470, you do have the ability, if you are applying for both Category 1 and Category 2 services or equipment, that you can list both Category 1 and Category 2 on the same application. All right, that's not an issue at all. But it does ask us up front, what categories of service do you want on this form? Once you select it and click on Save and Continue, then it basically creates the layout of the application. So if you indicated category 1 only, all right, or if you incorrectly chose Cat 2 and you really meant Cat 1, it's easiest just to discard the form and start over. All right, but again, you are allowed to put both categories on the same Form 470. So once you choose a category, today we're just looking at category 1. All right, so I selected the option there, and then I'll click on Save and Continue. Give me just a second here. I just want to pull up the chat box just in case someone has a question. I can see it. All right, so now it's asking, do you have an RFP for any of the services being requested? Yes or no. If you answer yes, then you get the option to upload. All right, so you may have multiple documents. You may have one, let's say for your category 1, if you're indicating you're looking for, let's say, some point-to-point connections to go from your main library out to your branches. All right, so that could be an RFP document. It could be if you're asking for a hotspot for your bookmobile or a kiosk that requires an RFP. All right, so again, you would indicate yes, you have those documents, get those uploaded. All right, here's just a couple of quick examples. All right, like I said, it could be a simple spreadsheet with the addresses. For those branch circuits. For the wireless service, remember this is not that off-premise that we'll be talking about for patrons to check out. These are the hotspots that you would use, specifically for your bookmobile or a kiosk. All right, but again, just a simple Word document. I typically indicate who the billed entity is, along with the library system or the library's name, address, who the contact is, and then just a brief explanation. Like here, it's 2 wireless units with data for library's bookmobile and kiosk. I even indicate, the entity numbers for those 2 locations. And then, what's the bandwidth we're looking for, right? If I, specifically want, 5G, whatever, you can indicate that in the document, but something as simple as that. All right, so once you upload and you click on Save and Continue, then it's going to come back and ask, which of these documents do you want, for each category of service? This makes more sense when you're applying for both Cat 1 and Cat 2 in the same form. It's simply asking, which RFPs are you allocating for category 1 versus category 2? All right, if you're asking for both categories on the same application. Here it makes it very easy. We're only asking for Cat 1, and any document that I'm uploading will be for some type of Cat 1 service that I'm requesting. All right, but again, I would just check the boxes to the left. All right, you still have to check it. Even though you've gone through and uploaded, you still have to check the box to the left, indicate, yes, these are my Cat 1 documents. I'm sorry for the snarky little smiley face there, but of course, if you answered no to the previous screen about having RFP documents, you're not going to see this screen at all. I've actually gotten panic phone calls from folks saying, I don't see that screen. All right, you're not going to get this view if you indicated that you have no RFP documents. All right, so here's the real meat of filing the 470. It's adding the services that you want bids on, that you want pricing on. All right, so we build this table. So if there are multiple things that you're looking for, all right, if you want, like I said, the bandwidth down to the branch locations, if you want hotspots to be used by the bookmobile, and you're looking for the off-premise hotspots for patrons to be able to check out, that's 3 different service types. So you'll have to build a table with all 3 items listed. So we always start first by clicking on Add New Service Request. All right, and then you get a series of radio buttons, all right, that each time you click, you'll drill down, you'll see more options, you keep drilling down till you have everything, indicated. Now, if you click, initially we get 2 options, all right, seeking bids for the internet access, data transmission, or you're seeking bids for the electronics, the equipment that falls under category 1. All right, so each time, like I said, as you click, right, you're going to see the options specifically listed for that selection. But if you select the wrong option, all right, just click on the blue text, all right, just expand it again. And as we go through this, I'm going to show you all of it in the expanded form. All right, so let's start off with, if you're asking for, say, internet access and bandwidth options. So this would be if you're asking for the type service where, again, it includes both the bandwidth and internet, all right, where both are being bundled together. All right, so when you choose that first option, you'll see that there's a series of options here. All right, and again, I'll just give you an explanation of these various options. All right, so again, the first one is the bundled option, internet and bandwidth. And then I get these two options. I'm looking for bids for internet access and data transmission. Okay, and then we see the second option that says data plans for or wireless adapters for commercial wireless service. All right, so again, this would be the one specifically for a bookmobile, all right, a kiosk, and that requires the RFP. And I'll show you specifically what the options are there here in just a minute. So if I indicate that I'm looking for internet access and data transmission service, just go back and look at how are you receiving your service now. All right, so you indicate the quantity. So if I need, basically service for 2, all right, say if I need this for 2 branches, I put the quantity in as 2. And then off to the right, it says, well, how many entities will this serve? Well, it's going to serve my 2 library branches. All right, then it's going to ask us for the minimum and maximum capacity. Very important. We refer to this as building in capacity. The minimum amount is either, what you currently have, and if you're good with that, that bandwidth level, all right, leave that quantity as is. All right, so here I'm saying it's 500 megs. All right, or if you're currently at 500 and that's not enough, you can go ahead and list, say, a gig. All right, what bandwidth do you want for this upcoming funding year? All right, but then for the maximum, let's say this leads to a contract, say, for 5 years. During that 5-year period, you may need to upgrade your bandwidth. Some service providers will allow us during the term of the contract, to increase the bandwidth level. And the E-rate rule is that's allowed as long as 2 things: the service provider allows for it, and your Form 470 basically supports that level of bandwidth. All right, so if I indicated 2 gig as the max, but then I decided, well, I think I need 5 gigs, well, this 470 wouldn't support that level. All right, so again, make it, a wide enough span here between the minimum and maximum to allow you for that upgrade. All right, just do yourself a favor. Go ahead and put that on there. Now, to the right, where we're putting in the capacity, it's asking, are you seeking installation, activation, and initial configuration? Yes, and Christine, yeah, we call those co-term upgrades. So it's within the existing term of your contract. And it varies from service provider as to how those are handled. Now, where it's asking if you're seeking the installation, I always indicate yes, whether there's an install cost or not, just in case. If there is an install cost, I want E-rate to cover it. If you indicate no, because you make an assumption that there's not going to be an install cost, and then there is, you're out of luck. E-rate won't pay for that. All right, so again, just a good habit. Indicate yes there. Now, because we had uploaded an RFP earlier, and I indicated that, yes, this was an RFP for my Cat 1 services, it's automatically going to be listed there with the check mark next to it. Now, if this let's say this RFP was only for that bookmobile, all right, or kiosk hotspot, really doesn't have anything to do with this service, I can remove that check mark. All right, but again, it automatically checks that for us. All right, so we'll click on save the request. All right, so this is what it looks like. I just wanted you to see what it looks like in that collapsed form. All right, as you choose each option, all right, it just basically collapses the previous option. All right. Now, I do want to point out, this was something that was added a couple of years ago. And for most of our applicants, really isn't worthwhile. You'll see the option here that says save and create another request. When this first came out, I thought, oh, that's great. I don't have to go back to the table and do a lot of clicking. If you indicate save and create another request, it's a duplication of the request I just added with all of the options, a quantity of 2 for 2 libraries. It's for internet and transport bundled. I don't know, where that would really come in handy, unless it's a very large application, with lots of different entities. All right. Again, not very worthwhile. Typically, we don't use that. All right. So we'll just click on save request. All right, like I said, I'm just going to go through and show you what some of these various options will look like. So if you need to ask for the service, specifically where to find it. Okay, so if you are going to ask for the hotspot, that data plan for the bookmobile or kiosk, all right, we choose that internet and bandwidth bundle, because the hotspot provides both the access as well as the the internet access as well as the transport. And then we choose a second option. I seek bids for data plans or wireless adapters for mobile devices for commercial wireless service. All right. Again, that would be the appropriate option. Do not check this option if you're asking for the hotspots for off premise. All right. And you also get this, in red, letting you know that this is not a common option. If you did not upload an RFP at the beginning, it's going to give you an error message at the bottom of the screen saying that this type function requires an RFP. Now here we indicate the number of units. All right. So if you're looking at, let's say, 3 hotspots to serve your bookmobile and, maybe a couple of kiosks. All right. What's the quantity? So how many hotspots, all right, with monthly recurring service are you looking for? How many entities will be served? Well, my bookmobile, and if you have, 2 kiosks, all right, so the number of entities. Now it's also asking for the minimum and maximum capacity like we saw before. Here I generally put something like 1 gig to 5 gig. It really doesn't make a lot of sense, because we know that a hotspot really won't give you a full, say 1 gig, true 1 gig service. All right. It basically is to satisfy the requirement of having a capacity there. All right. But again, if you put 1 gig to 5 gig, that typically works. And then I still indicate yes here for the installation, activation, and configuration. So if there's some configuration fee or some fee to activate that hotspot, we want E-Rate to cover that as well. All right, any questions on that? That's pretty straightforward. Like I said, just running through these various options so they hopefully make sense to you and you pick out, yep, this is what I need to request. Now, I do want to point out here, when we select bids for internet access and or data transmission service, there is an option here that's asking for internet access only, all right, without data transmission service. I don't see many libraries selecting this. I see more school districts where, maybe they have their head-end circuit coming in from their service provider. But oftentimes, especially with smaller school districts, where they own the circuits down to each of their schools. So they're not looking for new circuits or replacement circuits for those buildings because they already own those. They just need the internet only, all right, commodity internet for those locations. So again, I see more schools choosing that option, just so you understand, though, what the difference is. And the system does say this is not a commonly selected option. All right, so heads up when you get that red text. Go back and look at, is this really what I need? All right, here we still have to put in the minimum and maximum capacities, the number of entities, and if there's installation that you want that covered. Again, just to make you aware what the difference is here. Okay, when we go in and we add a service, And we choose that, again, that initial internet access and data transmission service. The third option in the list, I seek bids to purchase data transmission service only. This means just the circuit. All right. And this is something I do see more libraries and schools asking for. All right. Where Oakland is providing the circuit coming, let's say, to your main library, and Oakland also provides, basically the internet. All right. So you would, in most cases, ask just for the circuits, just the transport. Let's say that Oakland circuit comes into your main library and you're looking for the circuit to go from main down to the branch, and you want just the transport. All right. You would choose that third option there. I seek bids to purchase data transmission service only. Okay. That does not include internet access service. All right. So that way it's really important that you indicate so that service providers know what it is they need to price out for you. Okay. So that they're not rolling commodity internet into that cost. All right. Same drill as we saw before. We still indicate, okay, well, what's the quantity? So how many circuits? Well, if you have 3 branches and you need a circuit going down to each of those branches, we would indicate a quantity of 3. We still indicate, well, how many entities are being served? Well, 3, each of my 3 branches. Minimum, maximum capacity. Same thing we saw before. What's the minimum? So if if you're good, smaller branch and you're good with say 100 megs, indicate 100 as the minimum, and then go out with a maximum capacity, maybe 1 gigs, 2 gigs. All right, that's not an issue. Same thing, indicate yes for the installation, just in case. Now, I do want to point something out here. Again, I've seen some schools apply for this, just a handful of libraries, but some very specific bidding rules if you select this option. We do have the option here for dark fiber. Dark fiber is where someone else owns that fiber, but you're responsible for lighting it. We see this maybe with purchasing service, say from a local municipality. All right. The bidding rule here is, first off, you have to have a formal RFP. This is one of those services that require an RFP document. And you have to detail, if you're looking at dark fiber, what's the bandwidth? All right. How many fiber strands? All right. You basically want, all the installation covered, if there's trenching, whatever, to lay the fiber. But we're also required to compare the cost of that least dark fiber to at least lit fiber, all right, to determine what's going to be most cost effective, down the road. Okay, so like I said, there are a number of bidding requirements here. I just want to explain to you what this dark fiber option is. All right, let me know if you have questions on that. I don't want to waste a lot of your time explaining something you may not use. Okay, same thing here, supervision. I see more schools, asking for this. This is where you own the fiber. All right, and it's typically a large, capital, project. It just, I don't see many libraries. All right, but again, this is where you're going to own the fiber and you light it. Now, maintenance operation option here. This would be if you already have a dark fiber circuit, that you're using, and maybe there's some services, all right, say some municipalities may not charge you a monthly recurring cost to use their fiber, but there is some maintenance cost for that. So should that fiber line get cut, all right, that way you can get that maintenance covered. So again, that's what it's referring to here. Okay, I know I'm running through these fairly quick. Please stop me if I need to slow down or if you have specific questions. All right, I don't want to lose anyone here. All right, so let's look at those off-premise hotspot devices, because this is brand new. And they've done a great job laying it out on the 470, the way we apply for this. So if you're looking for those off-premise hotspots, we always start first with, I seek bids for internet access and or data transmission service. And then we see this brand new option here. all right, where it says, I seek bids for wireless internet service that can be delivered with a Wi-Fi hotspot for off-premise use. They make it very clear this is what you're asking for. Now, when we go down to the quantity, okay, well, if this is initially, we're asking for the service, that monthly recurring service. They're treating the monthly recurring service and the cost of the hotspots as two different line items. All right, because remember, there's a separate budget calculation for the service versus the hotspot device itself. Okay, so I'm going to come down to this last option. All right. Then the quantity, well, let's say I want service to 50 hotspots and my patrons can check out. The installation here is grayed out, all right, because it is split that this is just for the service. And, there's no installation or activation for the service itself. It's usually tied to the hotspot device. Now, where we had to indicate, that capacity, asking for a hotspot for a bookmobile, they've corrected that here, and it's grayed out. So we don't need to put in, 1 gig to 5 gig or whatever. All right. Basically that it's not applicable. All right. So that makes that part easy. So all you're really doing is saying, how many devices or how many lines, I should say, are you asking for service? Now, if you also need the hotspot devices, again, they've made it very easy to go ahead and add both of these at the same time. Like I said, they've done a great job with this. So down below, we see the text here that says, please select this option to create an accompanying category 1 hotspot device request, all right, for this hotspot service. All right, so the actual hotspot devices. So I'll click on yes, or click check mark indicating yes. And when I do that, then basically the screen just expands. And then it's saying, okay, so this is for the function, the hotspot devices or Wi-Fi hotspots for off-premise use. All right, so here the quantity is how many hotspot devices that you want. All right, so here I indicated the 50. Now, because the installation or activation fee is typically tied to that hotspot device, that box itself, I'm going to indicate yes. So if there is an activation fee, I want that covered. It still points to if you have an RFP document out there. All right, so remove the check mark if it doesn't apply to this. Okay, and there's no minimum maximum capacity. All right, so like I said, very, very straightforward. All right, let me know if you have any questions on that, because I know that was a really quick run through. Jane, very good question. So if you already have hotspots, all right, you already have the devices. If you want E-rate to cover this, you would basically, you still have to go out to bid, all right? You still have to answer this, even if you're already in a multi-year contract that's going to cover this upcoming funding year, all right? But if you already have the devices itself, all right, then you're going to fill out just the service portion. Okay, so you could say that you're looking for service for, let's say you currently have those 50 hotspot devices. All right, so indicate 50. And then in the narrative, you could explain, all right, that you're looking for service, for your existing hotspots. And Jane, let me know if you need more information there. Tom, your question, if you have 200 hotspots and you want to add 100, you don't have to do 2 different 470s. All right, what you could do if you already have service for 200 hotspots and you need to add 100 more, then I would do a service request for a total of 300. All right, but then when I click on the check mark there that I also want some devices, all right, then I would put in the quantity for 100. And then in the narrative, just explain that you already have 200 hotspot devices already, that you need monthly recurring service for that, but you also want to add an additional 100 hotspot devices with service. So you're seeking service for a total of 300. Does that make sense? And Brenda, your question, how do we ask for 5G? Just state that in the narrative. Like I said, it really surprised me the fact that, well, the FCC is the one who lays out the form, that they still have that minimum maximum capacity when you're asking for a hotspot for the bookmobile, but then they totally remove that for the off-premise. All right, so yes, so you could just put that in the narrative. And Christine's comment, so Oakland is working on a consortia RFP, all right, to try to get vendors to to bid state level. All right, Christine, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, basically the idea with that is we know that not every vendor has statewide coverage. No vendor has statewide coverage, but we're going to be issuing an RFP where to be in the RFP language, bids will only be considered if they are accompanied by a engineering level map, not just a consumer level map that says, oh, here's pink. We cover all the pink, or here's blue, or here's green, or here's whatever. We're going to make them say, okay, down to this little area here, we will cover 4G or 5G, and we're going to make them specify what level of coverage they have in the different areas. Parsing out that RFP has been more complicated than we were thinking at first, because with this program, the basic idea is, well, the basic idea is that the E-rate funding will cover a discount of service up to $15 a month, and it will cover a discount of equipment up to $90 a month. Well, it may be that you want a $120 piece of equipment because that includes free replacement, or it may be that you want $20 or $30 a month service because that is 5G rather than 4G, or because it's not throttled or versus it being throttled. So we're trying to get this RFP articulated such that we know that you all will be able to compare apples to apples. So still working on it, hoping to get that done before the end of, well, actually by the middle of November, before Thanksgiving. That's the target. So if you want to do your own, great. There's no reason you can't, but we're also working on this option as well. So just to let you know.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome. And let's see, there's a question, and a very good question. If we already have hotspots provided by Verizon, or other vendors able to provide service for these devices? That's why I recommend in the narrative, state that you're looking for service for your existing hotspots. You don't need to state that, that you will only go with Verizon. In fact, you can't do that because it has to be fair and open. But you can state that you're looking for service to function with your existing, X number of hotspots. All right. So by stating that it has to be, it has to work with the existing equipment. So if you get a quote from another vendor and okay, this is not going to work, then you can eliminate them or score them down in the bid matrix. All right. This was something that we had asked the FCC basically to forego the bidding piece since so many people already, libraries or school districts already had hotspots, and in some cases were still under contract. But they said no, they would not waive the bidding requirement. Okay, so we kind of treat this like we would if you were asking for bids for category 2 equipment, where you've already standardized on a certain manufacturer and you've got compatibility issues. If you go with a different manufacturer, then we simply state that, whatever's quoted must be compatible with our existing infrastructure. Same idea here. All right. So again, you would just state in the narrative, that any service quoted, must function with the existing hotspot devices. Now, the vendor may, a vendor may reach out and say, well, who do you have currently? Then you can answer that question. All right. But you cannot put on a 470 that you will only accept, Verizon service. the FCC says that's not open and fair, and that's a bidding violation. So it's how do we work around that? All right, Tom, thanks for that reply there. And Doug, your question, so how do we define bookmobile? Well, with bookmobile, it could also include an outreach vehicle. It could also be for a kiosk. You know, I've worked with some libraries where, you know, maybe they will have, you know, 3 or 4 different kiosk sites with, you know, where multiple library staff members go out, you know, at the same time, servicing different, you know, parts of the county. Because I've gotten review questions that, well, why do you need 3 of them? Why can't they share one? Well, because they're going 3 different directions at one time, right? So again, it could be that outreach vehicle. It could be, like I say, a kiosk you might set up in a community center. Does that help? Good, thank you. All right. So again, the number, and back to Tom's question, you know, the number that you put in here for how many hotspots you know, you need service on may not match what you're asking as far as hotspot devices. All right, because again, that's very reasonable, right? That you already have hotspots because ECF paid for a lot of those devices. All right, but maybe, you know, because those have gotten lost, patrons didn't return them, they got damaged, right? You need to, you know, replace some of those, or the demand was such that you need to increase, right, the number that you want to provide service to. All right, so again, the number of that you have here for service does not have to match what you have under the equipment itself. Now, I do want to point out here, and I don't want this, I know it's going to be confusing, but I just want to show you, if you failed to check that little box, because the text is pretty small and it's right down at the bottom of the screen, asking, you know, do you want to add the hotspot devices? All right, that actual equipment. So if you fail to check the little box and you realize, well, we do need some more hotspot devices, all right, you can go in and add it separately. That's not an issue. But just so you know where to do that, when we click on add new service, you come down to the second option where it says, I seek bids for category 1 network equipment or maintenance and operation. All right, when you choose that, then you're going to see 3 options and you want to come down to the bottom. I seek bids for Wi-Fi hotspots for off-campus use. So again, this is the device itself, not the service. So don't confuse those two. All right, and just like we saw before, you put in the quantity, indicate yes for installation. Any questions on that? Like I said, I hope that didn't confuse things. And Tom, your question? Asking for free replacement hotspots, would that be allowed? I'm hesitating, Tom, because sometimes, you know, service providers providing free equipment can be viewed as violating the gifting rule. You know, you might want to put in the narrative on the 470, you know, vendor must, or you can upload an RFP document. Like I said, it could be a simple Word document, you know, saying, you know, here are our expectations. You can state, you know, vendor must give, you know, clear instructions on or what's allowed as far as replacement hotspots. I'm trying to be very careful how I word that so we don't violate gifting rules. Did that totally confuse you? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Because I know that has been the policy, you know, that during ECF, because the monthly recurring cost that ECF would pay would cover was up to $40 a month. And then, you know, that was just part of the I would say service that you got the hotspots for free. That was just, you know, part of you getting that that service. All right. But now, because service providers now can charge you up to $90 for those devices, coming back and saying, well, no, you've got to give us those for free. I think the FCC may frown on that. Basically, there's not a good answer there. But I would be careful, indicating that they have to give you free replacements. Okay, so you just keep adding, whatever services that you're asking for quotes. Now, keep in mind, if you're not sure what you're going to do with, say, the off-premise hotspots, you could go ahead if you need to file a 470 for, say, your bandwidth down to your branches. You could go ahead and file a 470 for that, because you can have multiple forms. So you could go ahead and file for the bandwidth for the branches, and then file a second 470, just for the off-premise hotspots and service. So you could have multiple 470s. All right. So here you can see that this is what the form looks like as you've added those services. Go through, look at that table, make sure you've captured everything you want to get quotes for, on this form. So you can see that I've asked for standalone data transmission service. So those are those point-to-point circuits, just the transport, no internet access there, just the transport, minimum, maximum capacity there, to serve 4 entities. I need a quantity of 4 circuits. All right, and yes or no, whether I indicated I wanted any installation costs covered. All right, then we see the cellular data plans air card service. That would be for the bookmobile. Okay, I'm trying to stress that so it doesn't get confusing. All right, versus the hotspots for off-premise. Anytime you add, that type service, all right, that's going to serve patrons, look for the language that says off-premise. So we can see where I've asked for the internet service itself, as well as the hotspot devices. It does not have the word device there. It just says Wi-Fi hotspot. Now, if you see that there's something else that you need, all right, you can click on the blue option there, add new service request, just keep adding those services. All right, if you're done adding the service, if you just scroll down, it's all on the same page as what you would see with this table. All right, is the narrative box. So this is where you have the opportunity to explain what it is that you're looking for. But like I said, you could also upload, that simple, RFP document, Word doc, a PDF, whatever, giving the details. You could also indicate, you could upload a map, all right, which would be a really good idea. You could upload a map showing, this is the area that our library system covers. Any vendor, any provider providing quotes for the off-premise Wi-Fi has to show that their service area, basically that we would be fully covered. All right. Now, if you look at this and that depending on the county, that, okay, I know one provider is not going to be able to cover my entire county. You could actually go with bids from 2 different companies. All right, there's nothing to prevent that. There's nothing in the order that prevents you from having service from multiple vendors. Just want to point that out. Now, in the narrative, it gives us some instructions here, that this is where we give any disqualification factors, any additional details about the eligible location. All right, so again, I referenced that spreadsheet with the addresses if you want, if you need point-to-point circuits down to the branches. Okay, but this is your chance, to spell that out. So here I said I'm seeking a minimum of 1 gig bandwidth to serve our 4 library branch locations. And then if I do have that RFP document attached, I always add the language, see attached RFP for full details. That gives the service provider a heads up. They need to go look at that document for additional information. All right, that just hopefully cuts down on some of the questions you're getting. All right, and then I also indicated that we're seeking 2 cellular hotspots to serve our bookmobile and library kiosk site. Again, see the attached RFP. We're also seeking a minimum of 50 hotspots as well as service for off-premise use. And Tom, to your question, all right, this is where I would explain we're looking for service for a total for 300. With the additional 100 hotspot devices, but service, for a total of 300. All right. Again, I hope that made sense. Give me just a second. Yeah, and Jane, not a problem. So the cost, so again, this is all brand new. And the FCC has said that they would fund and when we talk about that $15, that's what we call the pre-discount amount. All right. So if you were to get a hotspot service for $15 a month, let's say your discount rate is 80%, you would get back 80% of the $15. All right. And then if your service provider is charging you for the hotspot device, they will fund up to basically up to $90 as a pre-discount. So same thing. So if you paid $90 for that hotspot device and your discount rate is 80%, you would get back 80% of that 90. But yes, there are caps as to what will be funded here. And as Christine mentioned, if you go with a service plan where the monthly recurring cost, per line is $25, then the additional 10, all right, that's over that cap, that would come out of pocket along with your 20%, all right, what we call the non-discount portion. Right, let me know if you need some more information there. Okay. And Jane, also a lot of this we covered in the beginner session. And I know Christine has a recording of that where we detailed some of this. All right, but again, don't hesitate to ask questions if you need more info. Okay, now this question here about an installment payment plan, 99% of the time that answer is no. That really only applies if you're looking at doing like that dark fiber build out or that self-provision build out, where typically those installation costs are very large. I've seen some of these where the install was like $1 million. A lot, okay? And let's say the applicant was at a 70% discount rate. That meant, because I saw this large school district where this was the case, where they had to pay basically 30%, $300,000 out of pocket. E-rate was covering the other $700K. All right, so this was just, if you indicate yes here, you're letting the service provider know that you want some type of financing plan, all right, to pay out the portion that E-rate's not covered. Okay, so don't confuse the install with the other option to get E-rate to cover, that smaller installation piece. All right, and again, I hope I didn't totally confuse everyone. Just know 99% of the time you're going to answer no here. All right, so if we're done putting all, explaining things in the narrative, putting in, the any disqualification factors, I can click on Save and Continue. Now here it does ask, is there a technical contact person? So basically, someone in addition to, the person who was originally listed as a contact on the form. All right. Now, the technical contact does not have to have a portal account. All right. So it makes this a little bit easier. So if you're the person who's going to be answering the technical questions, indicate no and save and continue. If you indicate yes, that you want to provide information about a technical contact, when you answer yes, it's going to ask, do you want to search the Epic system, all right, to find the user, or do you want to enter their details manually? All right, so here I've indicated manually, and then, all right, it's going to show you here the required fields, right, exactly what you would expect. Their name, phone number, email address. Email address we have to enter twice. Now, this may sound like a weird comment only because I've seen it happen. I put it on my slide here. Do not add anyone affiliated with a service provider. All right. If you are contracting with a service provider for some additional help, they cannot be the technical contact. All right. It has to be someone, employed by the library system. All right, again, not affiliated with the service provider. Okay, now here it's asking, are there any state or local procurement requirements? Yes or no. Typically, we don't have any state bidding requirements, but I still indicate yes here because it's saying, or restrictions on how or when service providers may contact you or any other bidding procedures. Something like a mandatory walkthrough of each location. All right, this would be more for category 2. All right, but again, you can list your requirements. Also, USAC has indicated, this is something that's come about over the last few years, that we indicate the deadline that a vendor has to get bids to you. It has always been treated that, because we have to be out there a minimum of 28 days, we've always treated the 29th day as the bidding deadline. Right? If you wanted to give more time, you were allowed to do that. Well, USAC now says, we need to indicate the deadline for that. All right. So you could put that information there. All right. Now, before we go to review, I'm going to share. All right. Here are some things you might want to consider. All right. Some of those some additional requirements. Something like vendor must have a SPIN, a service provider identification number, at the time of awarding the contract. All right, because if it's a new vendor, you've never worked with them before, they've never worked with E-Rate, they don't have that identification number yet. Then you run into issues when you're ready to file the 471, because that's how you identify who you're buying the service from. All right, so again, just something you can put there. You can put that you prefer in-state or a local vendor. If you want to, a better chance of staying with your current provider, you can indicate a previous experience with vendor preferred. So then when you do your bid evaluation, all right, if it's the vendor, such as it was mentioned, like Verizon, and let's say you get a quote from another cell provider that you have no experience with, then in this case, in this example, Verizon would get the full points, with 0 points for a vendor you don't have experience with. Right? Or maybe it's a vendor you had experience with previously, but the service didn't work in your service area. You had issues with the service. All right. So you can basically, score down that negative experience. Right. If you're adamant that you want discounted billing, because remember, with E-Rate, there's one of 2 ways to receive the funding. Either you pay the bills, in full, and then you as the applicant would file the bear form for the reimbursement, right? The other option is for your service provider to give you discounted bills. So let's say the discount rate is 80%, right? Then the service provider would bill you for the 20%, and then the service provider files the SPI form to get the balance, all right? So if you're adamant you want that discounted billing, put that in that, I would put it in the narrative, as well as the state or local bidding requirements. Vendors must put in writing the willingness to offer discounted billing. Okay. Vendors bidding on off-premise hotspot service must indicate the geographic area their service covers and identify whether there are any dead zones where there is no coverage. And then this last bulleted item, the applicant reserves the right to reject bids that are received on or after 9 a.m. on the allowable contract date shown on the Form 470. So when you file a 470, it's going to show you a date called the allowable contract date, which is the 29th day. So you're letting vendors know that the deadline for them to get you pricing is by 9 a.m. of that date. All right. So we always say that we reserve the right to reject the bids. That kind of gives us that back door if we need to give a little more time. All right, but again, just some suggestions, because once you get to the point of evaluating the bids, it makes that process a little bit easier. All right, so now let me skip back here 1 second here. So once we click on review Form 470, all right, if we're done putting in all of our bidding restrictions, all right, any of those instructions, then we click on review Form 470. Now, when we click on review, it basically takes us out of the application, and typically takes about 2 to 3 minutes. It varies. It just depends on how busy the system is. All right. But the system will create a new task. So in order to complete this, we have to go up on that blue menu bar, click where it says task. All right. Now, if it's not done working on creating this PDF version of your form, it will tell you when the FCC 470 PDF is ready, a task will become available. All right. It just means it's not done working on it. But once it is completed, all right, when you click on task, you'll see something that says certify Form 470. It'll give the application number that the system assigned it, and as well as the nickname. So again, that's very helpful, that nickname, if you have multiple 470s out there. All right, so again, that blue text is a hyperlink, so you'll click there. All right, and now it'll say download document link. It's going to give you a hyperlink here where you can click there and pull up a PDF copy, all right, of that draft version. So that way, look it over, make sure you have all the services on there that you expect to ask for, make sure quantities are correct, bandwidth levels, all of that detail. All right, when you look at it, if it is correct, check the box right below that saying, checking to certify that the information is correct. And then you can click on continue to certification. If you do see that there was a mistake, you decided you needed to increase the quantity, say, of the hotspot service, if you click on back, it's going to take you back to the very beginning of the Form 470. You'll just keep clicking on save and continue, going from one page to the next, get to that service page. All right, so if you need to edit or add a new service. All right, but again, when you click on back, it does take you all the way back to the beginning of the form. Now, if you are, if everything looks good, you're ready to certify it. There are two options here. There's send for certification or continue to certification. If you are a full right user, that means that you've been given the authority to fill out the form as well as certify. All right, so you'll see that option. If you are a partial right user, you have to click on send and it will send it to all full right users in the portal. Okay, just keep in mind, if you're going to send it to someone else to certify, go tap them on the shoulder, let them know, give them a phone call, whatever, let them know that there's a task in the portal, all right, that they have to complete, because your form's not, not done until they complete that step. All right, so I'm going to click on continue to certification, and then it says, okay, do you want to proceed? Yes. All right. Read through the certifications. The bottom line, every single one of them have to be checked. You cannot, leave something unchecked. All right, it won't let you proceed. So all the certification boxes there on the left-hand side, you need to check all of those. And then down in the bottom right, you see the option to certify. When when you click that, it pops up that says, okay, here are the penalties for false information. All right, click on yes. All right, and that will actually complete it. Now, I have noticed it can take several minutes if you want to go back, immediately and look at the posted 470. And I recommend you go in fairly quick to verify that allowable contract date. What's that 29th day? But like I said, I have noticed that this part does take several minutes for the status of the form to change from incomplete, meaning it hasn't been submitted yet, to certified. So if you look at it and it's still at incomplete, basically, refresh your browser, right? Go back though. You want to make sure that the status does change from incomplete to certified. All right, so to pull up a copy of that form from the landing page, if you go all the way down to the very bottom of the landing page, give me a second, let me pull up, let's see here, give me just a second. Okay, this is a training site that USAC has made available. It might be easier to see it from here. All right, so this is the Epic landing page. If I go all the way down to the very bottom, all right, we'll see this section called FCC Forms and Post Commitment Request. All right, Form 470 is the default. All right, but I have to click on the pull down and choose the funding year, the most current, or excuse me, the most upcoming. All right, for any forms that we'll be filing right now will be listed at the top. So we see 2025. And then it's going to show all the 470s filed. Now there's quite a few in here because basically my going in and playing with this, I guess you could say. All right, so it'll show you the nickname, all right, the application number, and then the status. So you can see that I have one out there that I canceled earlier, all right, but then here's a second one. Even though I use the same nickname, it doesn't care. It has a different application number, and we can see the status of that is certified. The one that I had started earlier, you can see that it's incomplete. All right, so if I wanted to pick up where I left off on this form, I would go up to task and click where it says create. All right, but let's go to the one that I did certify. All right, when I click there, all right, this is the all-important date that I'm looking for. Allowable contract date. So that is the 29th day. And I stated on my form that bids are, basically due by 9 a.m. on this date. All right. So again, just go back, verify that, share that date, with any decision makers. All right. To make sure that, no contracts get awarded prematurely. All right. Now, if I scroll down, it's going to show me all of the services. If I want to look at the RFP document, I can click on view. All right. And then any narrative that I have in there. So all that information is there. So again, make sure, go back, check that allowable contract date, put that on your calendar. All right. Just makes it a little easier to know where to find that. All right, I do want to show you, the couple of changes with the form. So if you realize that you needed to add, say, a service map for the hotspots, all right, when you're sitting at that page where you see the allowable contract date, you'll see the option here, this menu option called Related Actions. When you click there, then you're going to see some menu options. The first one is if you need to change the application name. All right, that's very easy, doesn't affect any of the services, but you can change that application nickname if you weren't descriptive enough. All right, but the two highlighted here in red, these are the two new ones where you can add an RFP document. All right, the very bottom one, cancel the 470. All right, now if you need to, I also want to point out, if you need to change the main contact or if you want to edit the technical contact, those are a couple of other changes you can do. Now, I do want to point out here, if you click on add an RFP document, it is going to give you a question asking you, is this going to change the service somehow? And Debbie, yes, your question. So funding year 2025, it's funding year, not fiscal year. All right. So funding year 2025 will start July 1, 2025 and go through June 30th, 2026. That always gets confusing. All right, I'm going to go back out to the site here. All right, so if I click here on related actions and I say I want to add an RFP document, all right, it's going to ask this question up front. Does this new RFP constitute a substantial change to your Form 470? So this is where you need to be very careful. If you're adding a document saying, we're changing our quantity from 50 hotspots to 75, all right, because you realize you made a mistake on the form, all right? If I indicate yes, that this is going to change my service somehow, and in 99% of the time when we add something, it typically changes the service. So when I indicate yes here, then it's going to reset that 28-day waiting period. So you want to be really careful there.
Lori, we have a question in the chat. Funding year 2025 starts in July of 25 and goes through June of 26, correct?
Correct. Yes. And I'm sorry, that's what I was just stating. Yes. So funding year 25. It's okay. It's okay. Make sure I said it correctly. Yeah. Yeah. So FY 2025, that's funding year 25, starts July 1, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. All right. But thank you, Christine. All right. So again, this is where you really want to be careful because if you change that date, all right, again, you've got to wait another 28 days. So if you're, midway through the waiting period, simply starts all over again. We also want to be careful if we're changing that date. Is that going to push it beyond, our ability to file the 471 by the deadline? So again, just be mindful, anything that changes the services, that's going to restart the 28-day waiting period. All right. But we do see the option here to upload. And then we check the box to the left of, which services does this RFP pertain to? All right. So again, it's just upload, attach the document. all right, check the box to the left, and then you submit it. All right, but again, really important, just so that you know that it will reset that waiting period. All right, so we've waited the 28 days. The really big piece here, right, is doing that bid matrix. You have to justify why you went with one vendor over another. So the E-rate rule, it's been this rule since the beginning of the program. When you're comparing bids, price has to be the highest weighted factor. Now, USAC does not dictate this point spread as long as you can show that price has the highest number of points. All right, so we can look at, again, we've got price there as 50, prior experience with the vendor. All right, we've assigned 20 in this case. Compatibility with existing infrastructure. So this could also be compatible with your existing hotspot equipment. Flexible invoicing. So did they agree to give you discounted bills or not? All right, and if you stated that you had a local or in-state preference. Right, so you just basically plug in the vendor's names and assign the points. All right, so you can even, if you wanted, you can add a row, so you plug in the monthly recurring cost. All right, so you have that on the document. It's not required, but you can certainly do that. All right, so we can see here that vendor number 2 had the cheapest price. All right, but their product isn't fully compatible. Okay, and they're not in state, and that's our preference. So even though they were the cheapest, okay, they didn't receive the highest number of points. So again, very important that you create this document, you keep it in your files. You do not send it to USAC, all right, unless they ask for it. Now, if you go out on my resource page, I do have a Word document out there. It has for both category 1 and category 2. All right, so there's 2 pages to it. All right, but it's just a Word doc, so you can edit. All right, I've already assigned point values, but again, if you wanted to add some additional factors, all right, just be sure, and you adjust the points. Plug in the vendor names, so it's already out there, like I said, out there for you to use. Okay, and then I've even added down here, based on the above bid matrix criteria we've chosen, all right, you plug in the name of the vendor and the type service, and then where you could put in your name, you assign it and date it. All right, so again, you keep that in your files along with all of, the valid bids that you received, both winning and losing. There are, different types of audits that can happen. It could be even 3, 4, 5 years down the road where an auditor will come back and say, okay, show us, both the winning and losing bids and your bid matrix, right? Did you do your due diligence and, choosing a vendor? All right, so again, you keep these in your files. Okay, that's the 470 in a nutshell. I use the same question slide every year just because I like it. All right, so are there any questions?
Floor is open. You've been really active in the chat today, so
And that was
keep
very
them
much
coming.
appreciated.
Do the hotspots need to be SEPA compliant? Oh, Lori, I'll let you handle this one.
Yes, this one's always fun. So the FCC actually did give us clarification here. And it was a very welcome clarification. It comes down to, this sounds kind of crazy, but it comes down to who owns the laptop, the tablet, the desktop, basically what's CPU, okay, smartphone, whatever, who owns that device. All right, so if it's that patron who owns the laptop and they're simply checking out your hotspot, you do not have to filter. You do not have to be SEPA compliant. Like I said, it was a
So
very
the only
welcome.
case where libraries would have to worry is if they're circulating laptops and hotspots, right?
And we have gotten the question, well, what if the school, all right, because the schools are eligible for E-rate, but what if the school is providing the laptop? Well, then it falls on the school to be SEPA compliant and do the filtering piece. And you typically won't ask who's, what end user device they're using,
Yeah.
right? It's only like Christine said, if you're handing out both the laptop and the hotspot, then you have to be SEPA compliant.
So one of the things that's making our RFP construction a little complicated is we are, for folks who want to be SEPA compliant, that's part of their policies, and that's part of who they are and whatever. We're trying to make sure that vendors can be clear about how they do their filtering with their hotspots. Whether they can do domain name server, which would put you under umbrella, the Cisco umbrella that we have, or if there are other ways that they do it. So if you are interested in SEPA compliance with your hotspots, that may be a possibility, but have to be, it depends on the device and not the hotspot. So thank you, Lori. That was very, very welcome clarification from the FCC and USAC.
Yes.
Great question, Debbie, by the way.
Yes, thank you for asking that.
Any other questions, folks? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Maybe.